Shalom and welcome to the Fan's Perspective. My name is Eliana Piepsh. I'm a former IDF combat commander and a diehard Commanders fan. And today I'm going to be talking about some players in this year's upcoming 2026 NFL Draft that I'm a little bit higher on than consensus, and a couple of players I'm a little bit lower on. I think overall we're covering about 10 players more or less. So that is what we're going to be doing today. My claim to fame, you could say, which is not really a claim to fame, just my personal bragging rights, was I was very much on the 2021 NFL draft. I was very high on Micah Parsons, as was everyone. He was picked with like the 12th overall pick or something, so not something so crazy there. I was very high on Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was a 4th round pick at the time, ends up being a top 10 receiver in the NFL. I was very high on Paulson Adebo, who was a 3rd round pick, and now has a great second contract with the Giants and is a above average starting corner, which you would love to get in the 3rd round. And Davis Mills, who I liked, who maybe has not developed into being the starting quarterback that maybe someone would hope for, but he was a late round pick, and he is one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league. Now, you could be asking yourself, that was 5 years ago, 2021, so why do we care that you were on it in 2021? But in my defense, I drafted into the Army in November of 21, so that was my last draft before I was did not have the time to really fully deep dive into the 22 and 23, and honestly, a lot of the 2024 draft class. I did know Jaden Daniels in 2024. I was kind of looked at the quarterbacks because that was very obvious where Washington was going to go. But the 2022 and 23 classes, I just knew kind of like the big top 10 names, and that was kind of it, which is very sad because I love the draft. Is what it is, and honestly, it was all for the best because imagine if I would have deep dove in. And I did know I wanted Kyle Hamilton and not Jahan Dotson, don't get me wrong, even with my minimal research, that I knew I would not want Jahan Dotson over Kyle Hamilton. Maybe we should just stick and pick. I know it's this crazy, crazy thing, but maybe we should do that. And in 2023, I knew that Emmanuel Forbes was like 5'11", 170. Not happy about that. And I knew Christian Gonzalez was like 6'1", 200 with great movement skills. So I knew enough, but if I had like fully deep dove into it, that probably would have broken my heart more. So in my defense, as I said before, I was kind of offline for those couple of years. 2024, I just knew Jaden Daniels, and that was basically it. And then this past year, I was back into it. So I was very happy with Washington's draft class, and I still am. So hopefully that translates well. So we're just going to dive right into it. No need to take too much of your time. If anyone is interested, last week I did an episode going through about 40 players in this year's draft who I think Washington could target after round 1. So Washington only has a 3rd round pick, a 5th round pick, 2 6ths, and a 7th. So there's not that many picks for Washington to be able to plug up holes. So what players should Washington get? So I went over almost every single position on the field. I didn't do tight ends. I didn't do special teams, obviously, and I think that's it. I think I covered everything else. And so there's at minimum 2 players per position, and I think at receiver I got like 12 players that Washington could target in later rounds. I give you kind of a round range where I would like that player. So if you're curious about that, feel free to watch it. But today we're just going to be going through mostly top 100 prospects who either I'm higher on or lower on. And yeah, let's dive right into it. We're going to be going according to the PFF NFL Big Board. So to start us off, I'm going to go with, I think, which is probably my hottest take, which is David Bailey. I am not a David Bailey fan. As you can see here, he is ranked the 6th player in the draft. I would not touch him anywhere near the top 6. I wouldn't touch him in the top 10. Now, Washington has the 7th overall pick. Washington could use an edge rusher, as could basically every team in the NFL with the possible exception of the New York Giants, and I'm not a fan of his. I think he is a mid to end 1st round talent. I still think he's a good player. I think he's a great get-off, but I think the hype is way overblown. Currently, there's a lot of smoke around him going to the Jets at number 2. We'll see if that happens. As a Commanders fan, I would love that to happen because that's just one more player who I don't want Washington selecting at 7 to go ahead of us. So I want all the quarterbacks to go. I want David Bailey to go. I did a kind of a best case and worst case scenario mock draft a little earlier, so you can feel free to see my thoughts on that. But I would love for David Bailey to go to 2. I would feel better for Jet fans, but I'm just doing what is, in my opinion, best for Washington. I have him in a mid to late 1st round pick, and I'll explain why. That is, yes, he is extremely productive. So if you lead the FBS in sacks, you're probably going to be a 1st round guy, especially when you have the height, the weight, the speed, like he does have. You know, he's 6'3", he's like 250, which is adequate size. He's an average run defender, which I feel like nowadays average is kind of used as a slur or an insult, and it really shouldn't be. I always hear with Caleb Downs, oh, he's an average athlete, or he has average size. Average is 50 percentile. Like, average isn't bad. You don't have to be Kyle Hamilton to be a great safety. It's the below average where I think question marks start flying. So he has average size, which is fine. He's an average run defender, which isn't great, but okay, you're not drafting with the second overall pick to be tackling running backs. You're doing that to be able to get pressure and sacks and fumbles and turnovers on the quarterback. So he has proven to be very good at it. Now, where my questions lie for him is I don't think he has great bend. You can see if you watch the tape, when he goes against top level competition, top level tackles, his production really starts to slip. Now, if you just box score watch, he did have some, productive games against like Utah, for example, who have a couple of both their starting tackles are projected to be first round picks this year. But I think if you actually watch the tape and go and watch him snap by snap, he's nowhere near as dominant against higher level prospects. And with all due respect to the Caleb Lomus and the Spencer Fanos of the world, who are these Utah tackles, for Spencer, there's questions whether he can really hold up outside at edge. He has about 33-inch arms, which is right around the cutoff. There were some questions with Will Campbell, and he had an up-and-down rookie season. So whether or not he's going to get drafted as a tackle is a question mark in and of itself. And then Caleb Bloom was the back end of the first. Maybe he can develop to become a starting caliber tackle. So this isn't even like a Joe Alt level prospect that he's going up against and not having as good production. This is kind of your average NFL tackle, if I'm going to be nice. So I have questions about how he's going to be able to translate that production into the NFL when you have better athletes, longer athletes, technically sound tackles. So I don't think that's going to be able to project as well. I don't know how he's going to transfer that. And as I said, having below average bend, which I think he does have, is a struggle because I think he's kind of a one-trick pony. His power isn't great. He's more of a speed rusher, being at 250 pounds. So I think he's just kind of a one-trick pony, average run defense. Maybe his get-off is good enough that he can get you like 7 to 10 sacks a year, maybe, but that's not someone I'm taking with a top 10 pick. So I would much rather leave him for someone else. I'm not very high on David Bailey. Now, let's go to other edge rushers that I am higher on than consensus. So let's go to Zion Young. Zion Young, I am very high on. Right now on PFF, as you can see right here, he's the 40th ranked player. So 40 means kind of top of the second round. I would have him, honestly, at probably between pick 20 to pick 30 of the first, maybe 32 if you want to say it. Top pick 20 to back end of the first is probably where I would have Zion Young going. I think he's great player. He doesn't really have many negatives in his game. He doesn't have maybe something that wows you, but I think just overall, just really good, really solid run defender. He has been productive. He's much bigger. He's 6'5", 262 pounds, as you can see. So he's a bigger, stouter player, much better against the run than a David Bailey, let's say. And he has been productive. He's had kind of better years and worse years, but overall, I'm a big fan of his. And I think if you're a team trying to think of a team in that range. For the Bears, for example, you need an edge rusher, go and get Zion Young. I think he's a very high floor, and he's less risky than a David Bailey, who maybe, if everything translates well and he takes another step, maybe he can be a perennial double-digit sack guy, but I have way more questions about that than Zion Young here, who I think can get you probably 9 sacks a year, 8 sacks a year, if he continues on this train of development. I don't think that's crazy at all, and his floor is much higher, so I'd much rather have Zion Young at the back end of the first than maybe taking a risk with a David Bailey. Now, adding to Zion Young, who I think obviously is like a great player, another player I have in almost the exact same range is Gabe Yakis from Illinois. If you watched the last episode, I'm a huge fan of his. I would love for him to somehow fall to Washington to 71, but I personally would take him in the back end of the first round. Exact same range as Zion Young, kind of pick 20 to end of the first. That's more or less where I would take a player like this. He is 6'3", 270 pounds, so he's even bigger. He's just a powerful edge rusher, very productive in college. He had a 1.59 split. David Bailey had a 1.62 split. So Yakis even has a better split than him, and David Bailey's go-to thing is his first step. So whether or not a 10-yard split translates exactly to a first step or first couple steps in a pass rush is a little bit more up for debate. If you just want to go through numbers, Gabe Yakis has better numbers, athletically speaking. He's a much bigger player, much stouter player. I would absolutely love Gabe Yakis at the end of the first round. All right, so that was basically edges. One player I'm lower on in David Bailey, a couple that I'm higher on in Zion Young, and Gabe Yakis. We're going to another kind of big-name player who some people have for Washington. I am just not that big a fan of, and that's Carnell Tate, as you can see here. He's the 10th ranked player here, according to PFF, and I think in a normal year, it's probably taken pick 15 to 25-ish in that range. He has been a number 2 playing with Jeremiah Smith on his team, so I understand you have to be a Jamar Chase level prospect, and even that maybe, to be a 1A, 1B with Jeremiah Smith, and I get that. But even the year before that, when Emeka Ibuka was on the team, he was the number 3. He doesn't have to deal with this, press man and double teams and having the whole defense shaded to you. He's never had to deal with that. That in itself is kind of maybe enough of a question mark for me not to draft a player in the top 10 of the first round. He's 6'3", 195, which is really good height. Maybe you would like for him to get closer to that 200-pound range. And in my opinion, every year, there's always receivers that are available in that 15 to 25 range. So last year, for example, Emeka Ibuka was there in that range. The year before that, we have Brian Thomas Jr. Before that, we have JSN, Zay Flowers. You can get high quality players. Justin Jefferson was picked, I think, in the 20s. Every year you can get high quality receivers, top 5 caliber receivers, which doesn't mean that every year if you draft a player in the 20s you're going to get a top 5 caliber receiver, but that has been shown year after year that you can get those quality of players, and it's specifically at receiver, and it's not the same at most other positions. Normally you either have to draft them early or it's just not going to work out. If we're going to talk about more big picture, like offensive linemen, if you don't draft your offensive lineman in the first 2 rounds of the draft, you're probably not getting a very high caliber starting offensive lineman, if we're going to be honest. Now, receivers specifically, you can find receivers in every round in the draft, which in my opinion would then lower the value of receivers, similar to running backs. Running backs in general are a less valuable position than receiver, obviously, but you can find a running back in any round of the draft. For example, Washington with Bill Krosky-Merritt, he was a 7th round pick. Kyle Monangai with the Bears was also a 7th round pick this year. Every single year you can find a running back in any round of the draft who can be productive. Now, if you're a receiver, and this is not a Jamar Chase level prospect, this is not a Julio Jones level prospect, why would I take him in the top 10 in a draft, any draft, if I don't think he's that caliber of player, and instead take, let's say, like an Omar Cooper Jr. in those teens to maybe early 20s pick? I just don't understand the logic of that. And as for your team, especially like Washington, who isn't going to make the Super Bowl this year, let's be honest, all right? We love Jaden. We got to the championship 2 years ago, and that was a fever dream. And we're not getting to the Super Bowl this year. So if we're not going to the Super Bowl this year, then why would I not take the best player available at linebacker, at safety, you could argue running back, I wouldn't do it, but I think there's more of an argument there. Then reach for a receiver who would be probably a 20s-ish pick in a normal draft. And then next year, assuming Washington is good and productive and we compete for the playoffs. So Washington would also have an around 20th overall pick. So the 20th overall pick is basically the first team that makes the playoffs and gets kicked down the wild card round. Let's say Washington does that, or we just missed the playoffs, so we have a late teens pick. There will be a receiver next year that will be a similar prospect to Carnell Tate, who we can get with that pick. And that is much more worth it because there will not be a Caleb Downs level player who will be available at 19 next year, or Sonny Styles or something. Why would I take Carnell Tate, who's probably going to be a reach at the 7th overall pick, and then next year have to settle for the number 3 cornerback in that class, or the number 4 edge rusher in that class? Why would I do that? Instead, I can take the number 1 rated player at position of safety or linebacker or whoever, and then take the receiver who's a similar caliber prospect to Carnell Tate. That's my whole big why I don't want Carnell Tate. But in general, I think he's a fine prospect. He's a first-round level prospect, and I think the talk that he's not going to get out of the top 5, in my opinion, is crazy. I just don't see him as that level of prospect. These are receivers. They grow on trees, and I understand they're very important, and they're like the 3rd or 4th highest paid position in football after quarterback and edge. I think receiver is 3. So I understand that. So you can get this big discount because you're paying this receiver at a much lower rate than he would normally get. But it's just, do that when it's a player who is worth that draft position. Don't just reach here for receivers. I personally don't really get this like huge Carnell Tate's just number 1 receiver. He's never shown it. And there are examples of receivers who have never shown to be number 1s in college who end up becoming number 1s in the pros, but that is just too rich for me to take in the top 10. So I am a little bit lower on him. Next on, we're going to have another couple players who I'm lower on. We're going to go with Chris Brazzell over here. So he's from Tennessee. And I'm not just scouting the helmet here, but Tennessee is known to have a very specific offensive scheme, and it doesn't always translate to the pros, right? You have Jalen Hyatt for the Giants, for example, who has not really turned out well. And Hendon Hooker was a great quarterback prospect who ended up kind of falling a little bit later in the draft than people assumed, and he hasn't really done anything for the Lions because it's a hard offense to then transition to the NFL from. And Chris Brazel over here just lines up on one side of the line of scrimmage and just runs the same few routes. And yes, he's 6'5" and 200 pounds and ran a blazing 40, and that's great. But Dante Thornton did the same thing last year, and he all through the offseason, it's he's going to be a starting receiver for Vegas, and maybe it's just a problem with Vegas. But he did absolutely nothing. There's just time and time again of these kind of big Tennessee receivers who just don't translate to the pros. And this is just kind of the latest installment, and he's projected to go here with their PFF rank of 58, which is back into the second. I wouldn't take him till like late third. I really wouldn't. I think at a certain point, a 6'5", 200-pound receiver who runs a 4.3, you gotta take. I'm not crazy here, but that's not worth a second-round pick to me. A second-round pick is a player who you're expecting to be a starter. That's more or less the pick that Washington got Trey Amos, and I'd much rather Trey Amos than a dart-throwing Chris Brazel. I think he's overrated. I think his athleticism is great. I think he's a very shiny toy, but I don't think it's going to translate into the pros. Now, another player who I don't think is going to necessarily translate to the pros, and that is Zachariah Branch. I can spell, you guys. Zachariah Branch out of Georgia. He's a gadget player. He doesn't run routes downfield. All he is like a screen or a slant yard after catch phenom. Now, he's great at it, so that's good for him. But this is not someone who's a polished receiver. This is not someone who I trust that day one can come and compete and can play well and can really produce for my team. He's small. He's 5'10", 180. I don't even know if he's exactly 180. This is a small guy. I don't know if he's going to be able to even hold up physically in the NFL. His route tree and his development and his polish as a receiver, I do not think translates to the NFL. He have him here going as well in the late second. I wouldn't really touch him till the late third or the fourth. I really wouldn't. Again, he has great change of direction and he ran fast and all of these things, but this is just not a player who I think actually translate to the modern day NFL. Unless you are, I'm trying to think of a team. If you're Cincy, right? You got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Those are these two big, almost complete receivers. You have Zachariah Branch. Sure, maybe, but I don't think you can draft him and hope he's a number 2. Maybe you hope he's a number 3, but that's just not worth a day 2 pick in my mind. That's worth a day 3 pick if you're hoping that a player is going to be a number 3 wide receiver for you. He's small. His tape in college does not necessarily translate to the pros. I am lower on Zachariah Branch. Now, the receiver who I'm high on, who, honestly, everyone is high on, and that is Ted Hurst, everyone, okay? No surprise here. I think he should be a second-round lock. I understand he went to Georgia State, so he's not going to be in the first round, but his tape is first-round caliber. He's 6'3", he's almost 200 pounds, he ran a great 40, he had a great Senior Bowl, he's had a great offseason process. This is a player who I would bank on. This is a player who I would hope, or I see, as kind of falling through the cracks in college, and then someone just gets him as a steal in the draft, and he gets unlocked in the pros. I am extremely high on Ted Hurst. I would absolutely love him to fall to 71 and Washington take him. I would rather, 10 times over, Ted Hurst at 71 than Carnell Tate at 7. I can't even express how much I would rather that. It's kind of my dream. Caleb Downs at 7, Hurst at 71. I am happy as a clam. That is the dream and the hope. So I just think he's going to be a really good player. I think he has all the tools that you need, and I think the fact that he was so productive at over 1,000 yards this past year in a really bad Georgia State team, I think just proves the kind of competitor he is. Doesn't matter that they had a couple of wins throughout the majority of this season, that it didn't matter to him. He was still going out, he was still balling, he was still trying to help his team win. And I think that's a really important aspect, especially for a team like Washington, who's had a long history of not winning games. Hopefully that's not something that needs to be translated into the NFL. Hopefully he'll have a lot of success in the NFL. But I think this is exactly the type of player you want. I think he can step in and be a number 2, and then possibly he can maybe become a number 1 in a couple of years after some development, because I think the jump from Georgia State to the NFL is probably going to be a very big jump. But I think he can do it. He has all the tools to do it. And I'm extremely, extremely high on Ted Hurst. All right, now we're going to go to DBs. Now, a player who, at the beginning of this process, everyone was really high on, then he didn't really work out, some question marks came, and then he finally did work out, and I think he just quieted all those doubters, and that's Jermon McCoy over here. He had the best tape of any corner in this class in 2024. Absolutely incredible. He is a great man-to-man corner. He has great movement. He has all the tools that you want. He's big, he's fast, he has good change of direction, all of it. Now, he's 6 foot, just under 200 pounds. He's got good arms. And the question was, does he have the speed? right? Or is he fully healthy from a torn ACL that he sustained like 16, 17 months ago, something like that? Because he didn't do anything. He got injured, or he tore his ACL in January of 25. He then didn't play this football season, which makes sense. He's recovering from an ACL. He then was probably healthy enough to participate in the Senior Bowl 12 months after his injury. He decided not to do it. That's his decision. He can do what he wants. He then doesn't participate in the combine. Another kind of question about his competitiveness. Why is he not doing this? He then comes out to the pro day, runs a 4.3, and I think just put all those questions to rest. At the end of the day, we needed to see him do something. And he did something. And he did that something really well. And I think you just move on, right? Caleb Downs hasn't done anything in this process. And I don't care. He's one of the top probably 3 players in this draft class. There's a lot of players here. Fernando Mendoza hasn't done anything, right? If you see yourself as one of the top players at your position, you don't necessarily have to work out to prove yourself. It's between him and Mansour Delane as who will be the first corner that goes off the board. Delane also didn't participate in the combine. I don't hear everyone crying about that, but he did play this college season. He had incredible college season, so I understand it's a little bit different, but I think we saw something from McCoy. He had better tape in 2024. He's a great man cover corner. Mansour Delane has like 30-inch arms. No one's talking about that. Ruben Bain arm gate, but give me Jermon McCoy. I think he's a top 10 lock, or should be a top 10 lock, I think, in basically any draft. I think he's a great player, especially in a draft like this, where there aren't many polished players at premium positions. We don't really have a plethora of quarterbacks, or really, in my opinion, any receivers, or kind of any left, for sure no left tackles, possibly tackles in general. I think this is a position, very high value position at corner, and I think he is a very clean prospect, with the exception of his torn ACL, his medicals, where is he at, and the fact that we haven't seen him compete in 16 months. But if I'm an NFL team and I have scouts and I can do background checks, as long as that all comes up positive and green light, I am for sure very happy taking Jermon McCoy with a top 10 pick. Now, the next player who I'm really high on, I talked about him in last episode, and that is Charles Demings from Stephen F. Austin, basically a small school in Texas. He's 6'1", he's just under 200 pounds, he has good length, he has great speed, and I would take him in that borderline day 2, day 3 range. I take him back end of the 3rd to kind of beginning to mid of the 4th. He right now is ranked 139th, that's more in the 5th round range, end of the 5th round range. I would take him earlier. I think he has the tools, especially with cornerback specifically. The athletic numbers are extremely important. The length plus 40-yard dash is, I think, the most accurate if you combine those two than any other position, right? If I just take 40-yard dash and length for receiver, it's not going to translate as well as corner. Or with edge rusher, it's not going to translate as well as corner. So he has the match. He ran a great 40. He ran a 4.4 40, and he's 6'1". He's got long arms. I'm extremely high on him as a player. If Washington misses out on corners, Washington eventually needs a cornerback. If we maybe see him there in that mid-4th range, Washington has an early 5th round pick. Maybe like flip a 6th in there and you move up to get him. If we don't have a corner in that range, Washington does need cornerback help. So I think that would be great. Just in general, even if it's not Washington and another team wants him, I think he's a really good player. I really like him. I like his tape. I like how he moves. Very, very high on Charles Demings. Now again, it's a question mark. Small school, he wasn't playing against the highest level of competition, which is why he's going to be available probably in that day 3 range, but I think this is a player that you take a chance on. Moving on to the next player who I'm really high on, that's Max Ihenachor. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his name right. His PFF rank right now is 30th, so that's right at the end of the 1st round pick. I would take him for a tackle, basically pick 16 and on. Now, I understand specifically the Jets probably don't need a tackle, so they're not going to take him with the 16th pick, but I would take him any point in the back end of the 1st round. He's 6'6", he's 330, he does not have a big football background, he's only really started playing football the last few years, he has been a right tackle in college. I think he has the tools to move to the left side. Now, he's young at football, so do you want to now continue his development and technique-wise, and then also flip him and then make him mirror everything? That might be hard to do in the 1st year, but this is a player who I'm extremely high on. I would absolutely hate it if Philly got him with their 1st round pick, because Lane Johnson's getting older. I think it would be a smart move for Philly. I would absolutely hate it. I hope he goes earlier or later, but honestly earlier for him. I think he's a great player. He had a great Senior Bowl. He has had a great offseason process. And I think it's exactly the type of player who you take for offensive linemen as well. Traits are a big deal. He's big, he's long, he has the tape, and and also he's young and you can develop him. He does not have a big football background. You can really teach him the technique, especially if you have like a really good veteran tackle there to kind of take him under his wing, similar to what Washington had with Laremy Tunsil, who kind of mentored Josh Connerly. I think that could be really useful. And I think he's a really good player. I think he is going to go in the first round because tackles just tend to go. There's probably going to be like 7 tackles taken in the first round, and I expect him to be one of them. But I would take him higher than Monroe Freeling or Caleb Lomu or Caden Proctor or all these other offensive linemen who are projected to go in that range. I would take Maxi Iheanacho over all of them. Now moving on to our final player, a player who I'm a little bit lower on. I think teams have started to kind of sour on him, and that is in fact Caleb Banks over here. He is ranked 32nd overall on the PFF big board, and that means right at the end of the first round, so right in that first round, second round borderline. I wouldn't really take him until like outside the top 10 picks of the second round, so that would be pick 42-ish, around 45, I would probably say is where I would start his range, for me personally. Now, he's very talented. He's 6'6", he's 330, he's a very, very big guy. He's explosive, and he can turn it on, and when he does turn it on, he is dominant. But he's dealt with injuries throughout his career. This past year, he only played like 3 games. He then broke his foot at the combine, still ran a great 40. But medicals are a question. His effort is a question. When he turns it on, he's great. He just doesn't turn it on all that often. So this is not a player who I would really want to take a chance on. If I'm Seattle, and I have a really talented front 7 anyway, and I just put him in there, he's got all these vets to really learn from, and I don't need him to be playing that many snaps. So when he is in there, maybe he's a little bit extra motivated, and those dominant snaps that are few and far between actually come out more often than not because he's not on the field all that often. Maybe. But if I'm a team, and I'm really looking for a starting defensive lineman, Caleb Banks is not my guy. First of all, his medicals scare me. Secondly, as I said, he doesn't seem like he's fully engaged every snap. When he is engaged, it's great. Because he's this huge, massive man, and there's not many 6'6", 330-pound humans who can run like he does, and can move like he does. But that is just too much of a question mark for me. This is like the most Cincinnati Bengals pick ever. Don't do it, you guys. You've been through enough. So, overall, this has been my players that I'm higher on and lower on. I would love to know what you think. Are there any players that you are kind of higher on than consensus, and you can kind of see in the NFL world that people are lower on that you like? Or the opposite? David Bailey's kind of my guy, who I really just don't see it. I would really not like it if Washington got him at 7. Colonel Tate's, same kind of thing. I think just overall, the receiver conversation is extremely interesting to me, because I feel like you can find a receiver at every round in the draft. And I'm not just talking about the outliers of Puka Nacua and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who are like 5th and 4th round picks, respectively. But I think if you look at the draft, every single round, you're going to find someone who was productive. Like Vlad McConkey was a 2nd round pick. Terry McLaurin was a 3rd round pick. As we just said, Amon-Ra, Puka, there's guys at every single round in the draft. You can find players. So why are we pushing up a receiver who would go in the 20s higher? Because I don't need to. I could find a receiver probably similar, who's going to have similar production to him in the 20s or in the 2nd round. This is not a position like corner who you're probably going to need to find a guy a little bit earlier if you want that high-level production. So I just think in general, people are kind of seeing it through this like fantasy football lens of points and yards. Yes, it is valuable, but you could also find a committee. As long as you have a number 1, you can find a committee that figures out. And if you don't have a number 1, how confident are you that Colonel Tate, who has never been a number 1, and has only recently been a number 2, can be that number 1 for you? That is something that I would just love to know from teams and from your guys' opinions. So as you can see, I'm kind of new to this. I would love to know your feedback, what you like, what you don't like, what subjects maybe you would like for me to cover. Now, we are a week before the draft, or we're starting the week before the week of the draft. So we're 11 days, 12 days away. I'm extremely excited for the draft. The draft is one of my favorite times of the year. I'm not one of those people who likes the draft more than the football season. That's not me. Football season is what it's all about. But the draft is a great way to kind of deal with the withdrawal of losing football. You got the playoffs, usually by then Washington's out of it. I dive into the Senior Bowl. You got playoffs, Super Bowl, got a couple of weeks to read up on players, catch up on players until the combine, and you just dive right into it. So I'm extremely excited for this. I would love to know what you like, don't like. I am hoping to be doing a couple of mock drafts, one being predictive, one being what I would do, so you can kind of get a sense for me and where I am at players overall. Also, how I think of team building, team needs, right? Carnell Tate probably isn't going to go very high because I just don't value him as a specifically as a receiver. I don't think any of these receivers are worth top 10 picks. So I think it'll be interesting for you guys to kind of see what I think and then to give me feedback on whether you agree, disagree, because everyone has a gajillion opinions when it comes to the draft. So that's it for today, and I hope to see you next time on The Fans Perspective.